Morning, everyone. Welcome to the scoreboard. Rishabh Pant hit a six so far today that it might have cost India their chance at their biggest comeback in Test match cricket history. I know that sounds like a weird and wild claim, but hey, India had spent all day knocking the ball around. Will O'Rourke was spraying it everywhere. Ajaz Patel was sent back into hibernation by India, I suppose, but by New Zealand, definitely. Henry and Southee struggled to put any pressure on. New Zealand ended up bowling their part-timers with an old ball in hope of a wicket, and it never came. So it was new ball or bust. And luckily for New Zealand, the new ball did swing a bit. And then Sarfaraz took time out from his favourite pastime of hitting everything to third, and he picked out cover. That sucked, but Rishabh Pant barely noticed at all. So even with Tim Southee swinging the ball around, Rishabh got down on his one good knee and whacked the ball over the Toblerone, the fence, the bottom tier, the upper deck, and out of Chinnaswamy altogether. At that stage, India became the favourites for the first time with the majority of bookies, and certainly morally. And moral favourites is the most important thing. This was it. India were really going to do this. The new ball had been annihilated. So the umpires went to their case and they opened it up and they chose an older new ball, a second new ball. And the issue for this one is that it must have just had like some sort of freaky seam on it because it went almost twice as much. The second new ball was 21 runs for 1 wicket from 6.3 overs. Pant hits a 6 and then India lose 6 for 37 in 13 overs to the second new ball. Pant hit the ball so far that he also hit India's chances of winning almost out of the park. I mean, they could still win. Maybe this is a test that we'll go back and we'll have a look at. It has one of those crazy scorecards where in the first innings and the fourth innings, both teams score in the double figures. And then in between, they both score like around 400. That seems odd. But let's be honest, everything about this match seems odd.
If you need your pitch changed, well, NordVPN can doctor any surface to a new location so that your IP address is set for you to win. Want to watch a game on a free stream in another hemisphere? Give NordVPN the ball. Or if you just want to watch a clip on social media that a cricket board won't allow, promote NordVPN to pinch hit. So if you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a 2-year contract with a discount, plus 4 extra months and gifts in some markets. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a bowler protects the boundaries in the death overs with nordvpn.com/Kimber today.
Welcome to the scoreboard. I'm Jared Kimmer. Please subscribe, leave a comment, like, all these different things. They all help us the way we're going. But if you're desperate to ask a question, the best way, of course, is always through a super chat. But normal questions, we might try and get to some of those as well. But let's start with the scoreboard, shall we? This is a great graphic. Well done to Varun for thinking this one up. I hadn't even thought about it myself, but we have to be honest here at a certain point and say that India has already achieved an incredible amount. And now conditions obviously dictate. In fact, I don't know if any match in the history that I've ever watched where conditions have dictated, because it's like, it's impossible to bat and India completely go. And then the tails start to make some runs. You go, maybe the conditions have changed and New Zealand start to score some runs. Then the following morning they come out. Looks really tough again. Then the conditions ease off and New Zealand do really well and India do really well. Then the new ball comes the new ball comes, I suppose. And things are absolute chaos again. It's just been a remarkable test. But you get bowled out for 46 in the first innings of a test match. To put yourself in any position to win a game, let alone have a lead, but in any position to win a game from there, considering New Zealand's second innings as well, I've said it once and I'll say it again. It's very hard to win a test match if Tim Southee outscores you in the first innings. This is India's run rate by session today. So no wickets to start the day. You can see just over 5. They probably kind of hovered around that. I thought a couple of times, I actually thought just before the rain, they might try and press on because they had about, 11, 12 overs till that new ball at that stage. And I was thinking that was a very good opportunity for them to be able to whack the ball around, maybe get it up to 6, 7 runs and over, part-timers bowling and everything else. Didn't quite manage that, did they? And then in the next session, they were still around 5 runs and over, still putting plenty of pressure back on New Zealand, moving the game forward, giving themselves a chance that if they did get a lead, or after they got into a lead, of putting runs on quick enough that they had plenty of time if it rained and everything else. Everything's going great, and then right towards the end, I think they lost a wicket off the last ball of before tea, and then after tea, the pull shot of Ravi Jadeja off the toe of the bat didn't really help at all, and then the tailenders had to handle the ball moving around. The ball that got Ashwin was a very, very tough one for a top order player to play, let alone someone further down the order. That's a lot of seam movement to deal with. But let's get back to our second new ball issue. I'm trying to think if I got that right. I think I got that right. So you can see here that the ball was swinging early on, and there was a lot of seam for a couple of overs, and then it kind of starts to plateau out a little bit, right? And you've got Henry here. His median seam movement is under 1 degree in this over. Oh, we just moved punt 6. That was fancy. But yeah, that's real life animation here. This is basically Disney, this channel now. You can see here, he's at almost 1 degree here, and he's at almost 1 degree here. This is solid movement, but there was a little while where it didn't move as much, and down here, this is an acceptable amount of movement. This is where Pant hits the big 6. Obviously, O'Rourke comes in and hits the wicket a little bit harder, but have a look at Henry. Henry starts seaming it a massive amount almost every over in a way that he wasn't before. And even in the overs where O'Rourke isn't hitting the seam, it's still doing something. This is the wicket of Rishabh Pant. That was a very, very tough ball to play. I do think, I don't want to underestimate the entire situation here. I think Rishabh Pant was desperate for his 100. We know he doesn't like being in the 90s. I don't think I've seen a batter as nervous in the 90s as perhaps someone like Michael Slater. And it's frenetic energy, isn't it? He's got a bung knee and he's trying to run a 2 to get his 100. He just didn't look like his head was in the game. Having said that, the ball that O'Rourke bowled to him was fast. It was back of a length. It was outside of stump, and then it seamed back straight into him. And he was still unlucky that it ended up hitting the stumps. Magnificent effort by O'Rourke, that delivery. But there's no doubt, looking at this graphic, that second new ball moved a lot more than the second new ball. Oh my God, I'm going to confuse myself saying all this stuff out loud. And this is the median degrees of seam. So you've got here that it was 0.56 degrees of seam with the second new ball. And with the second new ball, it was 0.89 degrees. Like, that's a big jump up, right? That is hard to handle. And if you look at how many balls went specifically over 1 degree, it wasn't when it was seaming before, and they bowled some good balls. I think there were 3 play and misses in the first over to swing, and there was some incredible. There was a ball that in the second over, so the 82nd over would have been, or 81st over, or whichever one it was that Henry bowled, which was angled in, hit the seam, moved away and would have hit off stump, but it actually starts to swing and somehow managed to swing past the stumps after the seam went upright after going through. So it wasn't that this was particularly easy. It's just that this was just quite clearly a lot tougher. I think Ashwin's batting was the most obvious way of handling it. I need to score some runs here. The other thing is, I think it was in this period, we saw a ball from Matt Henry that was bowled at the 8-meter mark, about 32 centimeters high. Generally, you would expect a ball at the 8-meter mark to bounce on a wicket like this 1 meter and 10 centimeters, maybe 1 meter 30 centimeters on a wicket like this. So it's about a meter less than you would expect. And we've got in here, we showed this the other day, actually. I might do a video on this because I think this is really, really illustrative of how different bowlers go about things. But what we could see here is that when O'Rourke is bowling, there's almost no swing at all. It's all seam movement. Well, I should say it's that I'll start that again. When O'Rourke is bowling, he's trying to get you know, as much seam movement as possible, really trying to bang the ball in, and he realized quite quickly that this ball was different. Whereas you could see here with Southey, this is, you know, genuine attempts at swinging the ball early on, and then of course we know with Henry it's a more of a combination of the two. Uh, I should have got Varun to bring up another image here, but you could see how much O'Rourke was spraying the ball around again. It's not as bad as we saw at times, but what he managed to do, especially with the second new ball, is he basically channeled the deliveries in here. And what that allowed for is there wasn't many balls that were wider. So if you look at some of the stuff he had bowled earlier, there was a lot of width on offer so people could get away. Suddenly everything was coming back in at the stumps quite regularly. So I thought that was a good comeback from him. Nothing that we wouldn't expect here from Southey. I'm not sure he's quite worked out how to bowl to left-handers perhaps at times in this match, but nothing that we need to concern too much there. And of course, you could see with Matt Henry again, just really, really good groupings. You know, the majority of his balls are just in here. Sarfaraz, I did a couple of graphics that I put up on Instagram if you want to see them as well, of just how hilarious this is. But this one certainly also tells you the story of his wagon wheel. It looks like a reverse wagon wheel. It looks like someone who doesn't know how to bat and he's just got a bunch of, I don't know, inside edges, outside edges, top edges, and got away with it. And it also has a very good ability to turn the ball to backward square leg, right? It's how he plays, his ability to turn a ball from the top of off stump into something that he can easily score, you know, to backward point or to square leg at times, I think is one of the reasons he has a first-class batting average of 70. I don't know how much this holds as he travels around the world and, you know, people see a lot more of him. Someone sent me a message today saying he only made runs because New Zealand didn't know how to bowl to him. I mean, they didn't know how to bowl to him in the first innings either. I think it was, you know, a few different reasons why he made runs, but there is an element of which it's very hard to keep him on strike. It is very hard to slow him down. It is very hard to set a field to him. Those are very good skill sets to have. Well, this was an excellent innings. I really liked the way he went about it. And because of his scoring rate as well, he put a lot of pressure back on New Zealand. And so they could never just get into any kind of rhythm against him. So these are his first-class innings in his career. So we know this is the period where he was going absolutely crazy, but just the consistency of scoring. It's interesting that there is a dip in here and that there's two dips. I wonder if that means he's a bit of a, you know, a batch scorer again. You know, we've talked about these sort of rhythm batters quite a bit of recent times. Babar Azam was one that we talked about. Usman Khawaja was another. I don't know how I feel at the moment. I mean, he's young in here, so I kind of don't have an issue, but it does feel like he's got like, he struggled a little. I mean, this isn't struggle because he probably still averages quite high in this bit, but struggles for him. He then has a God tier mode. He then has just regular, really high class batting mode. Then he has a dip, and now he's obviously slightly back up again. Something worth watching for him into the future anyway. Rishabh Pant did a Gordon Greenwich today on one leg. In fact, it'd be interesting to see. John Norman thought that he might actually retire after he got his 100 because his knee looked like it was giving him a lot more trouble as he went. There were times I actually thought he played the spinners better because his knee injury meant that he wasn't just dancing down the wicket and trying to hit everything for six. He kind of came down when he was absolutely sure he had to, rather than perhaps some of the other innings we've seen him play. Not that he's ever been bad against them, but he can sometimes be a little bit more reckless, and it made him play in, you know, sometimes an injury just makes you focus in a different way. I felt there was an element of that. Absolutely brilliant player. The 90s thing is an issue. The only way to get over that sort of stuff really is to start focusing on 150 is the only score that matters. And by the time you get to this is the Michael Clark trick. The reason why that matters so much is at 100, there's a huge celebration, right? At 150, there's not a huge celebration. So even if you get to 150 and you manage to make that, it's not like you're going to celebrate that like you have scored 100 anyway. And so you stop worrying as much about the milestones. The other thing is, if you go out for 140 a bunch of times, no one cares, even though a similar kind of thing. But I thought this was a great innings, and of course, this is the 6 that perhaps changed everything. I think it's that one, isn't it? Or is it that one? Felt like it was that one anyway. Dismissed in the 90s. So we've got, I think, who did I compare him to before? Slater. Slater was the one I thought was the obvious choice. I mean, we have seen other players who haven't made as many, who have struggled in the 90s. Trying to think. Greg Blewett and Chris Rogers are 2 Australians that come to mind that didn't do it that much, but there were some times when I would watch them in the 90s and think they don't want, they're not feeling comfortable there. Some batters it doesn't affect at all. I mean, this is my time when I have to tell you that you are statistically more likely to be out between 100 and 104 than you are in 97 and 96 and 99. And we focus way too much on hundreds, and it causes issues like this in general. So I personally, that's why I think having a mind trick really, really helps to be able to get past this sort of stuff. But he still made 90. It was an incredible partnership that helped change the day. There's an element of me that doesn't matter if he gets out in the 90s a lot. The issue that I have is if he's getting out in the 90s a lot and changing the way he bats. I think that is more of an issue because he was so on top at that point. Fastest to 9,000 test runs by number of innings. So Virat Kohli up here. I'm trying to see. There aren't many bad batters in this list, are there? It's a pretty good list. I thought Kohli batted beautifully yesterday. I don't know how much we talked about it actually in the end. I really thought that was maybe the best I'd seen him move in a long time, and it was a very good wicket for someone like Kohli. He had a little bit of extra pace in it. The spinner was bowling well, but perhaps I don't think spin was a huge factor. He's probably a little bit unlucky to get the 2 late edges that he got, considering how well he was batting. But sometimes that's what happens. And just the New Zealand spinners, there's something here that I really want to show when we're talking about the difference between full-time and part-time. You can see here that Ajaz Patel, and he's not the most accurate bowler in the world. Certainly if this was Jadeja or Ashwin, this would be a much smaller cloud in here. But you can see that the vast majority of his balls are between 4 meters and 6 meters. He does toss the ball up a little bit, maybe more than some other spinners, and he can bowl a little bit short at time. But just compare that to Phillips. And what we're talking about with someone like Glenn Phillips is, there's a full toss there. These are absolutely half volleys. Most of these up here are step and fetch it. And then we've got at the 8 meter mark, we don't have anything from Ajaz. And at the 8 meter mark, we have a couple of balls, but then a few other balls that are not too far away. Like, there's one good grouping of right-handers. Left-handers is kind of all over the place here. And you can see the same sort of pattern in Ratchet and Ravindra. It doesn't mean they don't bowl wicket-taking balls, but what it does mean is that they need something in their favour. And I thought Ratchet and Ravindra didn't bowl enough yesterday because I thought this was a wicket that might help him more than it was going to help Ajaz Patel. But interestingly enough that they went with the 2 part-timers for the second new ball today, and Ajaz had to hit the shower. Well, I didn't hit the actual showers, did he? But he wasn't needed all that much. All right, well, that's all we have for the scoreboard. If you want to ask any questions, this is the time to do it. As I said, Super Chats are the best way to go. I'm going to take a quick break here, and we'll be back in a while with more of this show.
Hit Wicket is the cricket game backed by Harsha Bogle and me, so it's full of nerd energy. This strategic cricket game isn't just about frantic tapping. You make decisions based on how cricket actually works. You've got to set a batter up, right? And you can't hit a 6 from the first ball. Hit Wicket knows all that, and they made a game that makes it work with a few gaming twists in there as well. So play, build, and manage your team, because you are the batter, the bowler, the coach, the selector. I mean, you're basically everything in this game, right? And there's no ads on Hit Wicket. So download it for free for mobile and unleash your inner cricket legend.
All right, welcome back to the scoreboard. I'm Jared. We've got some questions here. Vibor says, would Prime Australia West Indies be able to take this match far? yeah, well, I mean, if you prime Australia, West Indies would be fine in this one because this is conditions that have helped them. Don't think they'd have any issue playing this one. We haven't seen many wickets like this. I mean, we might never have seen a wicket like this because it's such a bizarre surface. It's maybe more like a slightly underprepared first-class surface because of the rain and everything. So we don't see surfaces like this in India. So if you look back in the last 12 or 13 years, there's probably no wicket like this, but there's probably a few wickets that have helped seamers, of course. I can think of a couple off the top of my head. There was the Bangladesh Test. There was Dharamshala at least once off the top of my head, maybe twice. So we have seen wickets that have helped seamers. We haven't seen a wicket like this. I mean, this is such a bizarre surface. The combination of lateral movement and inconsistent bounce up and down, and the fact that the new ball specifically is so potent, and then it's very hard to bat in the mornings as well. I thought, again, New Zealand did very well in the morning. They just couldn't break through, right? I thought they bowled quite well. So it's a really interesting track. So yeah, I wouldn't have any problems with Australia or the West Indies playing on this. But if Australia and the West Indies came with their teams to play India, what is the likelihood of a wicket like this? Is the better question. I don't think you want to play either of those teams on this wicket, so you wouldn't prepare it. Aurora says, do you agree with Jeremy Coney's point that the keeper shouldn't be allowed to bat if he can't keep in the second innings? It's an interesting one, isn't it? Until he said it, I hadn't really thought about it, actually, Aurora. What's the difference between a fielder? What's the difference between that and a fielder? So if it was a fielder, which happens, again, quite a lot, we don't seem to have any issue with it. There used to be stricter rules around wicket keeping. Of course, in the old days, you weren't allowed to have a substitute who would come on and wicket keep. So we've changed some of those regulations, and Jeremy would be coming from that period. So from that point of view, I understand why he's saying what he's saying. But if we're going to allow him to, we're saying he can bat, and we're saying he can't field. I get the point that Jeremy is making, right? And you know, if you're a bowler, you have to be on the field for a certain amount of times to be able to bowl. But that's not the case when you're here externally. So I think, and I could be wrong with this, I think what Jeremy has failed to understand here is that because it's an external injury, as in the ball hit him, I think the regulations are slightly different. So if he had just twisted his knee, they could still have a substitute wicketkeeper, but he wouldn't have been able to bat in the top 7, would he? So there would have been some limitations on him at that stage. But yes, I don't disagree with Jeremy. The only thing is I probably come at this from a different point of view of we should just have substitutions. And if he's injured, he should have been replaced in the 11 by one of the substitutions, and on we march. But that's not how cricket works. People says, I meant if they got out on 46 and then came back. Oh, okay, you meant in that way. No, because cricket wasn't really, well, yes. What was Australia? Let's have a look. 2005 Lord's Test. Yes, because in those days, you had lots of occasions where teams would be bowled out cheaply in the first innings, and still go on to do really well. I'm trying to think if there's any that have been 56, but no. But I would assume you'd have to go through the full list, people. But I would assume if you went through the history of Australia and the West Indies, there are times when they were rolled very cheaply and still went on to win Test matches. That was a lot more common, actually, because the wickets were a lot tougher to bat on in the 70s, 80s, and 90s compared to, well, 2000 to 2016. I'm trying to think of another one. I mean, what's one of the more remarkable ones would be South Africa. What was that? Australia, South Africa played a test match where South Africa were rolling and then lost a huge amount of wickets. And then Australia was bowled out for whatever it was, 50 odd. And then South Africa chased a massive total. Am I remembering that one? So that's one where it kind of happened. You didn't get. I don't think you lost. I don't think they lost the entire innings cheaply, but they lost 10 wickets for 50 odd runs, South Africa, and then came back. That was when they were a good team. So that's one off the top of my head. But there would be heaps of times when Australia was rolled cheaply in a test match and still probably went on to win quite easily. West Indies, I can't think of any, again, off the top of my head in the West Indies, but there were times when teams would roll them and then the West Indies would just come back straight back in with their bowling. So, yeah, that's fairly common. The difference here is the fact that that isn't what is interesting about what India has done. What is interesting about what India has done is generally if Australia or the West Indies or South Africa or any team would do something like that, they would fight back with their bowlers. So the South Africa game I'm thinking about, South Africa completely collapse and then Australia come in and they roll Australia. So the bowlers do the work. Whereas in this case, the bowlers didn't do the work, right? So India end up with a deficit of, over 300. That's the rarer thing here. So the rarer thing isn't getting bowled cheaply and going on to win a test match. That happens right throughout the history of the game. And certainly the best teams are usually, if you bowled out Australia or the West Indies for 120, unless the conditions massively changed, chances are they were going to bowl you out quite cheap as well, right? So they were almost automatically back in the game. This is a very different kind of situation. Roll says, who does Gill come back in for? It would be harsh to drop Sarfaraz after this game. He might come in for punt. Give KL Roll the gloves? Oh, they probably won't. They'll probably bring Dhruv Jurel back in. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I suppose... I suppose they just... we're assuming that Gill automatically comes back in. Is there a chance that they don't do that and they roll with a similar order? I don't think so, although maybe Kohli, having batted at number 3, feels more comfortable. So there's really 3 options, isn't there? Gill doesn't come back in, perhaps. I don't like it when players get injured, go out of a side, and then don't come straight back in, but sometimes life happens. KL Rahul goes out, or Sarfaraz. I would probably, where's the next game is in Pune. Sarfaraz is probably a better fit for Pune than KL Rahul. So maybe you might look at it from that point of view. Kick says, Rahul and Jadeja made sure to destroy what Rohit, Pant, Kohli, and Sarfaraz built. So, Kick, I've never seen one of your comments before, but I saw this come up and it's worth talking about. This is why you need to understand the full game. The other guys that you saw, when you saw them playing, were playing when the conditions were favourable to them. The ball wasn't moving around particularly that much. The pitch was behaving a lot more flat. The conditions were definitely in favour of batting. How do I know that? Because when Rohit and Kohli had batted, and maybe even Sarfaraz, there was an element of the fact that Tim Southee had just made runs. So to kind of accept your logic, you would have to think that somehow is Tim Southee a better batter than KL Rahul. No, what has happened here is that the conditions change. And so it was funny, we mentioned this on TalkSport, but also a lot of my friendship groups and my cricket groups were sending me messages, the same sort of thing of saying, KL Rahul is probably going to get a really good ball here and go out, and he's going to be absolutely massacred, despite the fact that the wicket has changed. Sarfaraz went out. Pant went out to the new ball. They were both set and absolutely starring. KL Rahul got a good ball. I don't think he played it particularly well, but I think he got a good ball. I've just shown you on a graphic how much different the conditions were from the first new ball to the second new ball. But if you want me to go back and have a look beforehand, that soft ball that the guys were making their runs against, and even the new ball at the start of the innings wasn't anywhere near what we just saw at the end there. You've always got to factor those things in. So that's just wrong. And to blame Jadeja after everything he's done, saving the Indian top order, I mean, come on, that's just silly. Joseph says, is this the most happening test match ever? Happening, I like happening. Sounds like you were at a 1930 speakeasy. It's a happening. No, I mean, God, there's been some mad England tests over the last couple of years, I would just say over the last 3 years, we just keep seeing test matches that I think I did a video day 1, day 2, whenever it was, that test match cricket is just high at the moment, right? It's just completely on some sort of hallucinogens, and we're seeing remarkable things all the time. Test matches that don't even make sense to us. You know, the India-Bangladesh game and the Pakistan-England game and the second Pakistan-England game. And, you know, we're seeing remarkable moments in test cricket and on a near daily basis. And this is just another one of them. If India were to win this game from this position, I mean, you know, the most happening test match ever thing comes right into frame. But we've seen a lot of these kind of matches recently. You know, I've been following test cricket, since 1991. I would say the last 2 years, I have had some of the most crazy test matches. And some of it is baseball, but I think just in general, if you go back the last, since 2018, pretty much since the bowlers took over, we've seen some incredible. We've seen 2 of the best chasers of all time in terms of, you know, single batters. We've seen, you know, the rise of baseball, you know, absolute just remarkably weird things like South Africa winning matches without any batters, Bangladesh coming good. You know, all these sorts of things have happened. It's been a really, really brilliant 6 years of Test cricket. So said, didn't something like this happen in the CSK versus RCB match? Dhoni hit the ball out of the ground. They changed the ball, which was harder to hit. And that was at the Chinnaswamy as well. I didn't know that one was at the Chinnaswamy, but I thought of this game too. So the 2 games that came instantly to mind for me were the Oval Ashes test when England asked for the ball to be changed. It was changed. One ball went dead straight. The next ball was swinging around corners. And then this IPL game. So just to explain the IPL game, what happened there was there was dew, and so the bowlers couldn't bowl slower balls. And when they did, they would bowl full tosses. One of those full tosses, or half trackers, I can't remember now, but got whacked out of the ground by Dhoni. Brilliant hit. They replaced the ball with a dry ball. Suddenly they started bowling cutters, and it looked like, you know, Chennai were going to win really easily, and that was the end of the game. It's a peculiarity of our sport, right? It's one of the more wonderful things about our sport. It's probably one of the more frustrating things about our sport. Remember, there was this whole conspiracy that England had come up with a weird ball where it's actually how it happens is so much more boring than that. They're usually just old practice balls that are put in a box, and it's like, well, that looks 6 overs old, and that looks 12 overs old, and that looks 24 overs old, and the umpires go through and they try and work out roughly the right thing. And I've seen teams get the ball changed, and absolutely it is worse for them from the moment they get it changed. And I've seen other teams where you get it changed, and suddenly that change, you know, everything, the entire match, and sometimes a series can do that. That is part of our game. I've been on about this for years, though, and really until the Oval game, I don't think people had cottoned on that these sorts of things were as important as they were. I would say that there was, during Bazball, I thought the balls going soft and what was happening with replacement balls was really, really interesting. And people wanted to talk about how bad the Dukes balls were that year because of COVID and everything else, which was fine. But I don't think we quite talked enough about how they changed the game. But if you have been following my work over Cricinfo and even Cricket with Balls in the old days, I've been writing about this stuff for 15 years. It's been a long-term thing. There's not much we can do about it either. It's the same with 2 new balls. I promise you this, about 85% of the time, a fast bowler will pick up a ball that looks darker red over a lighter red. And the thinking has always been that the darker red balls swing and do more, and so therefore that is the better ball to have. But you can have 2 balls of equally dark red. You pick one out of the box and you go, that's the one I want to use, and it swings around corners, it seems everywhere. And then the other bowlers pick the ball out of the box and they're like, great, another dark red one like the last one, and it goes dead straight. Our game is magnificent in its variance, and if you want to know about variance in Test cricket, we've had a hell of a Test match for that. The KOC says, can you talk about Bumrah's first 4 balls in the second innings? And India lost a review. One thing that we saw was that was talking about dark red balls. I know the clouds had come in, but that looked about as dark as a ball you will see. It was just moving everywhere. It was that sort of uncontrollable movement where he was trying to angle the ball across, probably trying to get it to wobble across, but it was then swinging. Even when the seam wasn't completely upright, it seemed to be swinging away, and he just couldn't control it. It's probably, I think it was Jeremy Coney who said if Rishabh Pant was keeping, they would have gone for about 8 runs just for buys, right, at that point. And then that's why India wanted to stay out there. They realized that ball was just absolutely hammering everywhere, and if they were going to have a chance of winning, that was a little bit of darkness, a whole lot of movement. It's a good partnership. Although if you're from New Zealand, you've probably faced a bit of that. And then the LBW, I was absolutely convinced that had pitched in line. On the first view of it, on the second view of it, on the third view of it, I was a bit more worried about the height. Look, they've lost a review. As I said, I would have reviewed that. Even having watched the first super slow-mo, I still thought that had pitched in line. Maybe there was a bit, sometimes we don't always factor this in, but there can be a sort of optical illusion part to it. There was, I think it was Ravindra was hit in his innings outside the line, and then he sort of slipped back, and his back weight was so far back as well that I think it created, again, an optical illusion that he was hit in front of the stumps when he was clearly hit outside the stumps. You've got, I think there's this idea that, I mean, the umpires don't always get this right, but think about if you're a bowler, you're coming in, you're bowling the ball and your head is dropping, you're on a slight angle. The idea that you're always going to get things completely right. The wicketkeeper has the batter in front of them. They can't always see leg stump. So they can tell you probably where the ball's going on, but they can't always tell you 100% where it's pitched. Mid-off and mid-on are on an angle. First slip is on an angle. The ball, to me, looked like it pitched on leg stump and straightened. And I don't know what happened there. But yes, it's not ideal. I mean, realistically, they're going to have to create probably 14 or 15 chances and, really, really quickly anyway. It's not going to be one of these ones that probably will be dragged out. So maybe the review won't matter all that much. I don't know. Mohammed says, what's your opinion on ground staff not covering the whole ground? It's not a practice done throughout most of the cricket world. So it's a fairly normal thing for people not to do that. A lot of it depends on drainage. This ground has brilliant drainage. So of all the grounds, I'm probably less worried about that. It does cause issues. I don't really understand why it can't be done more often, but people tell me, within cricket administration that it isn't the easiest thing in the world. But yeah, it's a pretty standard practice. It's not done all that much as well. And also, like, there are probably situations when you absolutely want the ground completely covered because of the kind of rain that you're getting in and everything else. But quite often what happens is they might cover just a big part of the ground, assuming that the rain's about to stop, and only put the rest of them in later. But yeah, it's not that common that you get the entire ground covered. I mean, Gaul is obviously famous for it. We probably, as a sport, if we were run correctly and doing things properly, would change how we do things, but no. Ronak says, Rain has played as the 12th man for New Zealand, while India got that Proteus fortune throughout the game. No, India have got some good fortune. When did India get some good fortune? When the rain break came this morning, I thought that was, if you were going to have rain, that was almost the ideal time for the rain to come for India. Because if the rain had come way earlier, their batters would have had to start early before they'd even got in. And if the rain had come later, it means that they would have had 2 batters who weren't fully set when they went back out. So there's a perfect example of the rain kind of going back in India's favour. And also, New Zealand just wanted to rush through to that second new ball at that point. And get through their overs. They probably didn't want India going off and having conversations or anything. And then tonight, yeah, I mean, it depends on how you look at it tonight, because you say rain was on the New Zealand side, but the fact that it was dark and that it was moving around was also because those clouds had come in. So at least for a moment, that was in India's favour as well. Conditions have gone in favour of New Zealand. massively. But India still got really good batting conditions in the second innings until that other ball came in and it got a little bit trickier. So, for instance, if I always look at the pattern. So New Zealand bowled very well this morning in what I thought were helpful conditions, but with an older ball, it couldn't break through. So if the pattern had been different and New Zealand had a newer ball at that stage, they would have been in a situation to put India under much more pressure, right? So, not everything has gone their way, but, they bowled a team out for 46. If you bowl a team out for 46, something's gone your way. Ditsy says, from what we've seen of New Zealand to now, do you think they compete in the next two matches if they don't get the conditions like they got in the first innings here? I still like Will O'Rourke. I liked him coming in. Nothing has changed about me, my feelings on him. Matt Henry can still do some damage. I like Matt Henry and Will O'Rourke with Bracewell to come in for Southey. I think makes them a better team. I don't think they can just pick Ajals and part-timers. I think they need another. I know Bracewell's kind of a part-timer, but I think they need one more more of a specialist bowler in the side, and that's probably the player you would pick. I don't think they'll pick Ish Sodhi. If they don't win this match, I would still think that India, well, regardless of whether they win this match or not, I would still have India as heavy favourites for the next two games. Nothing changes for me. We have seen India be rough at the beginning of series before and still come home and win quite easily. I think they're the better side. But New Zealand feel comfortable, more comfortable now than they would have coming in. So that's a big moment, or big thing. And that's us, I think, at the scoreboard. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming along. Chuck us a like or a comment on the way out. We'll be back again tomorrow. It's supposed to be earlier. I have no idea what time it will be, but it will be earlier. So check your local guides. And we will see you then again. But I'm Jared Kimber. This is the Scoreboard. And thank you for coming.
I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that. Like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with. And also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the Empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today.